Okay, good evening everybody, and many thanks to Julie Fiedler and Horse SA for inviting me to speak to you this evening about human behaviour change. My name's Debbie Busby and I'm representing the organisation Human Behaviour Change for Animals today. So, because most of you don't know me, I'll say a little about myself. I'm a clinical animal behaviourist based in the UK but working internationally. And I help horse owners to resolve serious behavioural disorders that they might encounter with their horses. I'm qualified to do this at master's level, and I'm registered with the Animal Behaviour and Training Council in the UK, which regulates training and behaviour therapy. I'm a member of the Equine Behaviour and Training Association in the UK, which educates horse owners and industry practitioners on the physical and psychological well-being of equines. And I'm a contributor to Human Behaviour Change for Animals, which aims to improve animal welfare by building the capacity of the people who work in that field to influence changes in human behaviour. So this evening, I'm going to give you a quick overview of what human behaviour change is and how it can be used to promote better equine management and training practices. I'll be introducing the 4 pillars of human behaviour change and one of the structured models that helps to identify the most fruitful targets for interventions that are going to promote change in any given area, because different changes influence different groups, whether that's the local riding population or horse owners nationally through to sports governing bodies or local and national equine policymakers. So first of all, I'd like to ask you to reflect on your own behaviour change. What have you tried to change? Have you tried to eat less or exercise more or stop smoking? And did you have the knowledge to make that change? For example, did you know how to exercise safely and effectively? Did you have a reason for wanting to make that change? Did you know the benefits? Maybe you wanted to feel more healthy or you wanted to lose weight. Was it easy to make that change? And if it was easy for you, why was that? And if it wasn't easy, why not? What made it difficult? Was it something about your own mental or emotional motivation, or was it an external factor? Changing our own habits and beliefs can be hard, and yet so often we expect people to change their behaviour towards their horses simply because we know something they don't. We think we just need to give them the information and they will see the light. Maybe, for example, we want people to move from housing their horses singly to keeping them as a group. We tell people about the welfare benefits of group housing, we explain the scientific research, and we describe how to make the change from individual stabling to a barn system, for example. We give people the information, but still they don't make the change. It's not always easy for people to change their behaviour for the benefit of their horse if it goes against their beliefs and how they've always done things. And this is what Human Behaviour Change for Animals is interested in, using what we know about human behaviour change to drive changes that result in improved welfare. So why do we need to understand human behaviour? There are plenty of good reasons why we could do better at understanding it. It's the root cause of most welfare issues for horses, people doing or not doing certain care, management or training practices. It can help to improve compliance, rapport and efficiency in horse management and training. And we're used to thinking about training and educating horses, whether that's training a horse to perform in our chosen discipline or retraining a behaviour we don't want. So how about thinking about re-educating the human animal? Despite horse owners' professed affinity with and passion for horses, there is a gap between the advancing scientific knowledge about equine well-being and the practical application of these findings by lay people. Around the world, horses are suffering compromised welfare across different parts of equestrian society. And in the UK, a recent research collaboration between Bristol University and World Horse Welfare identified 4 main welfare challenges for horses in the UK. And these were unresolved stress and pain, inappropriate nutrition, inappropriate stabling and turnout, and delayed death. And these challenges are especially stark if we define welfare using Meller and Reed's domains model, which considers good welfare to involve an animal thriving, not just surviving. It's an animal having a life worth living. So to try and break down this vast topic, we can consider human behaviour change in terms of 4 areas. And these broad areas are the pillars that support change in different ways. And they are the process of change, the psychology of change, the environment for change, and ownership of change. And these pillars span levels from the individual to defined groups and communities, going right the way through to mass change. The first pillar then is the process of change. And this recognises that behaviour change takes place in stages. And we have this great quote here from Schopenhauer to reflect this too. All truth passes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it's violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as being self-evident. And the trans-theoretical model of change by Prochaska and Di Clemente identifies these 5 stages of change. First one is pre-contemplation, when you're not even fully aware that you're considering making some kind of change, but you are aware that conversations are happening, maybe amongst peers or in social media. For example, the discussions about over-tightened nosebands. Then the second stage we have is contemplation, thinking about the what if of change. What might be the consequences if you loosened that noseband? Thirdly, it's preparation, getting ready to change, ready to take action. Maybe you buy a taper gauge to see how much you should loosen the noseband by. And then you take action, you do it. You start to fasten your horse's noseband looser. Final stage is maintenance. You keep going with the change over time, and then you always ride your horse with a looser noseband from now on. In practice, if we go in with an intervention plan at any level, whether that's individual, community, or national, before our intended audience even understands or is truly aware that something needs to change, they're not likely to be compliant in any change programme. And we need to consider cultural differences too. If welfare isn't even a word or a concept in use in some countries, then diving in with all sorts of information headed up welfare is not going to help. And still under pillar 1, we have the behaviour change wheel, which is one of the models that can be used to identify the most fruitful targets for achieving change, the doors that are most likely to open if you push at them. It's the result of a wide cross-disciplinary review of behaviour theories and behaviour change models conducted by Susan Michie at UCL, and it's something that can be used to help to address the gap between research evidence and the knowledge and beliefs held by people who care for and ride horses. So if you look at the screen, the middle of the wheel that you can see on the right of this slide incorporates the COM-B model, which addresses the capability, the opportunity, and the motivation required to effect behaviour change. If we look at capability, what does that mean? In this area, we're asking questions such as, does someone have the skills or physical ability to undertake what's expected? Do they understand or have the ability to assess what is excessive pressure on the reins, to use an equestrian example? Under opportunity, we need to look at things like social norms. I can remember a time when flash nosebands just weren't a thing. You very rarely saw them, but something happened to make them popular. A social norm changed. This category also refers to environmental opportunity. Does the owner have access to the resources needed for improved horse welfare? For example, limited acreage makes increased turnout tricky. Turning to motivation, we can use this to help people reflect. If I provide more exercise or turnout, My horse might be easier to handle or train, more likely to load into a trailer or a float, more likely to do well in competition. Or another person might be motivated by a belief that they are making their horse happy. So how can we educate them as to what happy looks like for their horse, or indeed feels like? There's no point in expecting a change programme to be successful if there is no capability, opportunity, or motivation. And we can waste a lot of time and energy trying to bring about changes in human behaviour that were never going to work because these three conditions were not present. So this green part of the wheel in the centre is where you analyse the behaviour first, and then you can match it to the best intervention. And the intervention areas are shown in the red part of the wheel. They include education, incentivisation, modelling, and environmental restructuring. And then as we move further out to the grey area, we're looking at the marketing, legislative or policy frameworks that can put this into effect. So this is a very useful model because it has a strong evidence base, and it allows you to identify the most suitable intervention before you go throwing a whole load of time and money at something. If you've identified a capability issue, you need to look at training or education. If the barrier is around opportunity, then you might look at changing the environment or leveraging social influence through modelling or demonstration, for example. We then move on to pillar 2, which is the psychology of change. And here we're looking at what is happening psychologically when we try to persuade people to change their perspective or the way they do things. And these next 4 conclusions have been found to hold true across a wide range of social psychological studies. Firstly, confrontation is the biggest predictor of failure to change. In the picture at the top of the slide, 2 people are looking at the same letter. One of them sees the letter N, one of them sees the letter U. Neither of them is likely to change their viewpoint, even if the other person gives them 100 reasons why that is a letter N, if they see it as a letter U. Secondly, an empathic approach is the biggest predictor of success in bringing about behaviour change. If you fundamentally believe that people are okay and that everyone can change, you have the best chance of succeeding. Next, the phenomenon of psychological reactance means that if someone gives you reasons why you should change, you're likely to highlight the reasons why you shouldn't. And in doing so, you rehearse these beliefs and make them stronger. And finally, we need to be aware of what's called the righting reflex. Like in the same way that a cat lands on its feet, we all automatically like to offer solutions, but then those solutions are not owned by the person we're trying to influence. We need to stop offering solutions so readily. We tend to think that people are like us, so we think that they will be motivated by what we are motivated by, but we're all different. Different people need different types of information to change their behaviour. It's no good just shouting one message to everybody. We can't assume that we know why people are doing or not doing something. Get that wrong and your whole strategy is flawed. We need to understand the barriers that stop people from making changes, understand their beliefs and the lens that they see life through. Our individual experiences and our relationships mould the way we look at life and the reasons for our actions. Understanding these aspects of human psychology helps us to better communicate and to drive change. And one last point on the psychology of change is to mention the confirmation bias. And this is a psychological term to describe that we're more likely to take on information if it aligns with what we already believe and know. So if what we need to say to somebody doesn't align with their knowledge and beliefs, we need to be aware of this and work out how we can be heard. Our decisions are not as autonomous as we would like to think. So we're moving on now to pillar 3, which is about the environment for change. And in this drawing on the slide, the elephant rider represents intellect, reason, and facts. And the elephant represents emotion, which can often be so much more powerful than reason. And even if the rider can direct the emotional elephant, so to speak, and knows where they want to go, that's not enough. There needs to be a clear path for them to follow. We need to create an environment for change by shaping that path for them. People's home and local environments have a huge impact on their ability to change. Home life, relationships, employment status all play their part, and the cultural and legislative environment affects the likelihood of successful change too. And the point reflected in the second picture here is that youth education set a different path for the future. Also, under environment for change, we can look at how social marketing can spread ideas within and across environments. Well used in the health and environmental sectors, social marketing works to enable change by providing a suitable environment, and it uses concepts from group psychology to drive social change. It is mostly relevant for mass change, but it can also be used on a smaller scale to encourage the take-up and spread of ideas and communities. And one of the advantages of social marketing is that it identifies barriers to change and proposes solutions, as you can see in the table on this slide. We need to understand the barriers to change, such as, why don't horse owners follow our training advice? Why don't owners follow a recommended worming programme? Why do owners carry on the hard way? And we need to use a proven method to truly analyse these behaviours rather than making assumptions, because wrong assumptions lead to ineffective communication. For example, if we take the question, why aren't people worming their horses? And we assume that the reason is that they don't know that parasites exist. So then we base an education display around giving them that type of information. But it might not remove the barriers to change if that wasn't the real barrier. It could be that those people knew that parasites existed, but held other beliefs, such as, if you can't see them in the dung, it's not a problem, or if the horse lives out, it's not a problem. So in that example, our communication would have been ineffective because we made a wrong assumption. We didn't analyse behaviours and beliefs. Moving on to pillar 4, we need to be aware of the impact of ownership of change. There's a saying, tell me and I forget, show me and I remember, involve me and I truly understand, which perfectly illustrates this pillar of change. People need to truly appreciate the relevance to them of any desired behaviour change in order for change to happen. If we understand that people learn and change not through typical top-down educational outreach or demonstration, but when they are truly involved in the process, we can facilitate that change. And this involves enabling people and communities to explore issues and come up with solutions themselves, rather than training them to implement a solution that was preconceived by an outsider. So how to involve people? Let them rehearse the behaviour. This photo on the left is from a project on skin issues in Cambodia. Grooming helped to resolve the skin condition, but nobody was grooming their horses. The man in the white shirt at the front is a vet called Yoki. He explained to the owner what was needed. Then he demonstrated how to do it. Then he held the horse while the owner practiced in a safe environment. And finally, the owner rehearsed the behaviour with Yoki present. This approach worked well on this project and issues decreased. The middle picture shows experiential involvement. You can see here some of the people who were at a demonstration were invited to actually feel the effects of different thicknesses of rope. And the final picture is a drawing done during a project in Palestine, when a horse owner suddenly realised that he could think like a horse. He could imagine the feelings his horse was experiencing. And this helped helped him to change the way he handled his horse. So to summarise then, change is a process, and it's not all about imparting knowledge. It's not what you say, but how you say it. And that's why psychology is so important. We need to avoid making assumptions. In any change project, a research phase is vital to match the intervention with the need. We need to truly involve people, make the change process participatory. Human behaviour change is a science. We need to embrace it just as much as behavioural science, equitation science, welfare science, or veterinary science. And finally, it would be great if you could join our Human Behaviour Change for Animals mailing list through the website CHBC for Animals. And just one last thing is to let you know about a new equine behaviour book that's coming out in October. It's called Equine Behaviour in Mind, and it applies behavioural science principles to the way we keep, work and care for horses. There's chapters on training, breeding, equestrianism, veterinary care, rehabilitation and more. The contributors are all accredited behaviourists and vets. It's edited by my colleague Suzanne Rogers, and it's published by 5M Books, and that's coming out in October. So thanks for listening. I'd like to acknowledge Suzanne Rogers and Joe White, my colleagues, in producing this presentation, and Julie Fiedler and Horse SA once again for inviting me to give you this presentation. Thank you.